I am here to share with you the exhibition of my show at Artwork Center for Contemporary Art in Loveland, Colorado. The show is titled Tragic Beauty, and it is about melting glaciers.
Elle, thank you so much for exhibiting with us at Artworks. We are thrilled to have your work here. I would really like to know, and I know many of our viewers would like to know, what the impetus was behind this body of work. How did you come up with this idea?
Yeah, so I started this series I think January of 2017, after the new administration came in the White House, and I was very upset about the reckless attitude toward climate change, global warming, the disbelief in science, and all the things that science was proving. And so I felt a strong need to express that concern with my artwork and make a statement. And I've been looking at a lot of images through video, saw some things on the news about melting glaciers in Antarctica, Greenland specifically, and I felt those were such compelling images that I really wanted to share those. And they were beautiful, they were intense, the colors were amazing, and the contrast between the ice, the white, and the melting water, which is so pure there. It has incredible colors. So I wanted to share those with the public and see if maybe it would raise more awareness.
And I think it definitely has. What is your hope for this work? Where do you, how do I phrase this? Best case scenario, someone who's seeing this work for the first time, it's visually extremely compelling, and the story behind it is a sad one. It's a scary one. Is this a call to action?
Yes, it is. Of course, the situation has gotten much worse. I mean, it's been dire all along, but it's gotten much worse since I started this 4 years ago. And people just need to be reminded. I think a lot of, well, for one thing, we don't live near glaciers. I mean, some maybe in Montana or something, and I guess in Colorado there are glaciers. There definitely are, but this sort of dramatic melting that you see, and it's easy to forget about it. So I really hope that people will, take it to heart and think about it more, and maybe have some call to action.
So I want to know, so you said that you were kind of drawn to the glaciers because of the color, and I'm sure also because of the melting, and with encaustic wax that's melting as well. But is there a reason why you chose to focus on glaciers as the center of your commentary on climate change rather than like fires or hurricanes or some other kind of like natural phenomenon?
Yeah, there was just something about those images that really called me. I will never forget when I saw, it's called the Larsen Sea ice sheet. And that was the very first image that really caught my attention and inspired me. And it was just an image of, well, they were explaining how it was cracking open, and that got me. And then it was just an image of this big crack, blue, and then deeper as it goes down. This piece, Antarctica here, is much more related to that situation. So that's more the ice sheet versus the molens, which is the shaft that these big holes, the shaft. I can talk more about molens in a little while, but yeah, it was just, I don't know, there's fire, and I've lived through fires here in Colorado and in New Mexico where I live now.
yeah, so I just love what you said about, you know, it kind of being like the glaciers, you know, being so far away from most people and not being a part of your daily life. And I think, you know, what you were saying earlier about how, you know, at this point in time, everyone's aware of the climate crisis. You know, most people have a sense of the science behind it. But how you were saying, it seems like people just tend to kind of forget or move on. So I think it's so unique that you chose your subject matter as something that is so kind of removed from people's lives. But in the end, you know, when glaciers melt and ocean levels start rising, it really comes back, you know, full circle to affect everyone. So
yeah, and in regard to your question about fire, I mean,
yeah,
fire goes on for sometimes months, but this is such an ongoing process,
yeah,
and it's slow but it's fast. So I think that speaks to me too.
yeah.
That it's just going on and on and on all the time, and eventually it won't anymore.
Right.
It's gonna be, they're all going to die.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just hope people will think about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a wonder when you find an artist who incorporates medium, concept, and craftsmanship in such a way that you have your medium is telling the story that you are visually, but the material itself, the wax, that idea. Samantha and I were just speaking to this the other day, that contradiction between heat and melting and cold, ice, hard, soft wax, heat, melting. And I love the play of that.
Mm-hmm.
Was that super intentional? Were you working in Encaustic before and this just worked? Could you talk a little bit about
Sure.
media?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it was interesting how that played out. I have been working with Encaustic for about 20 years, and I had been working a lot with Encaustic. I call myself a mixed media artist because I use a lot of different materials, but I love Encaustic. And when I was gathering images on my computer, and I mean, I was just so drawn to the images that I just, I want to do painting that, and it always starts out with the image I see, and then I do my own take on it, and the wax sort of takes over with that. But anyway, more in answer to your question, I had started painting them, just painting the Encaustic, and you for people who don't know, you put it on in layers, and you fuse it with, I fuse with a heat gun. A lot of times I'll fuse with an iron, which will give more texture. But at that time, when I started the series, I was just painting these images, and they were so stagnant. And I said to myself, you know, you're working in wax, and it melts. So I started to take more advantage of that property, and started pouring more and dripping. And when I take the heat gun, I would tilt it so that they would run as if it was water melting. So it worked out really well as a medium for this work.
Do you feel like that process of working with Encaustic with these pieces specifically, and really kind of like letting it do its thing and sort of go where it wants and you know, melt, do you feel like that's kind of changed your relationship with Encaustic for your future pieces?
Another great question. Yeah, yes and no. It just depends on the piece. And I've been working a lot with collage lately, where I incorporate Encaustic into it. And I mean, Encaustic is so textural, and it's so wonderful to achieve texture in different ways. So with these melting ones and the dripping, I wouldn't say I do a lot of that with the dripping and pouring in other pieces, but more brush strokes, texture, but you know, it did free me up a bit to be able to do that. And sometimes I'll just, yeah, it kind of made it so I was going with the flow. No pun intended.
Yeah.
It's extremely effective.
Yeah.
I think the layering, and you get that sense of looking into the ice, you know, and I'm really drawn to that. At first, you know, I thought, oh, these are calming, and they are in a sense, but they're jarring as well, and I think it's because of that content. You mentioned earlier, and you've titled many of your pieces Mulan. Could you describe what that means?
Yes. Moulin is from the French word mill, meaning mill, and it's basically what happens is a moulin is formed when on the surface of an ice sheet or ice cap or a part of a glacier, whatever you want to call it, when it starts to melt, it usually happens in the summer, it just starts, it creates a sinkhole. So the sinkhole just, you know, pulls all the water in, and it's usually about 10 meters wide, very, very deep, very deep. It comes out at the bottom of the glacier, which is where you get all the meltwater, which is affecting the planet so intensely. Yeah, so it's just the shafts. This is sort of depicting a shaft of the water running into that hole. But it's so deep, and that was compelling to me, the blue, black in the center, and then the beautiful colors of the water running into it, more at the surface.
And so, like, did you kind of know about these things sort of vaguely already? Did you have to do a lot of research behind these pieces to find out about things like this?
Yeah, there were a couple of documentaries that I just loved that really explained it well. I didn't do a lot of research, just more research of images, because I just found the images to be so wonderful. Every time I saw them, it's like, I like that one, I like that one. I wish I could see them myself and take the photos myself.
Right. Yeah.
Elle, I've noticed two paintings in this, or pieces in this exhibition that feel much quieter than the rest of the exhibition. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I think the two you're referring to is this one and the Antarctica that we were just talking about.
Exactly.
And I feel that this one is called meltwater, so it's more at the base. It is at the base of the glacier rather than where it's rushing into the hole, to the moulin. I just felt like these were a quiet reminder of and a little more slow of the death of these glaciers, more reverent of what was happening. Yeah.
Thank you. I can absolutely feel that with these. I think this is one of my favorites in the exhibition.
Oh, that's
because
nice
of
to
that.
hear.
It has that broken quality and
Yeah.
quiet, and you do get that sense of death.
Yeah, and it's almost like tears.
Absolutely.
So where there's like, you know, and especially that piece and this one directly behind us in Antarctica, it's reminds me of, you know, sort of like traditional images of like the emergence of spring when ice starts to break apart and you know, like the water kind of comes back out and everything's, so it's like this weird
Normalcy.
right, but then you're like, you're reminded by, you know, that what the content actually is, and it's sort of this like you said, it's very reverent.
Yeah.
And I love that contrast between them.
Yeah.
I think we have a question from someone who submitted a question online in advance of your talk. Samantha, do you want to read that question?
Yeah, so this question is from Blair, and her question is, can you talk about the connections between this beautiful and relevant body of work and the mixed media collages on cardboard you've been making and showing in Santa Fe this past year? Did the concepts for these two bodies of work come out of related interests or concerns?
Could you read that last?
Yeah. She just wants to know if the concepts for your collage pieces that you've been doing in 2020 and this body of work, if the interests or concepts behind them are related or not, or just how they kind of connect.
Yeah, well, I would say the connection is, the most obvious connection is, they're both environmental. The collages I've been making a lot of this past year, I'm using, it's very tied into COVID because I started making these with packaging materials, and I was getting all these boxes and packaging material inside the boxes. So I'm using a lot of cardboard, I'm recycling, and it's sort of a statement about the container and being contained, self-contained at home, and yeah, and using the recycled materials. So they're both environmental. And I would say that's the most obvious. Also, I did incorporate some collage into, specifically that one. This one is called The Tipping Point, and this is one I did a little later than this isn't one of the early ones, and I did incorporate collage into this piece. These are pieces of paper that have encaustic on them, and then the background is oil. So that represents more of the collage work I'm doing coming into this body of work.
Great question from Blair, thank you. Elle, what is next for you? What things are swimming around in your head that you'll be creating in the next year?
Well, I jumped back into this total encaustic work after doing all this collage with these raw materials. And even though I use encaustic in them, I was thinking about Jasper John's work and looking at Jasper John's work, and he was using cardboard and paper, and I have been loving so much doing just encaustic again. So I think it's sort of going to balance out what I've been doing this past year, and reintroducing myself to this series. It's an ongoing series, but I really, for the show, did a lot more work in the past few months. So I would like to have more encaustic in the collages because I'm really excited to work with encaustic this much.
Well, we can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you.
And if someone was interested in getting in touch with you about your work, they can always, this body of work, they can contact us at Artwork Center for Contemporary Art, and your contact information will be on our website as well. Do you have any other upcoming shows that you'd like to tell us about?
I don't yet.
Okay, yet being the optimal word.
It's early in the year.
It is very early in the year, absolutely. Well, we thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, and for letting us show your work. It's just phenomenal. You've been getting some great feedback already, and I think it's just wonderful for the Front Range to see what you've been working on.
Thank you. I love having this work in this beautiful space.
Thank you.